Welcome back to another episode of the Lawyers in the Making podcast. I'm your host, as always, Nate Crespo, and today we have another spectacular guest. She's a University of Pennsylvania Carey Law School graduate and currently works as the president, CEO, and general counsel of Focus Forward Consulting, chief leadership and talent officer for WOMN LLC, and as an expert and consultant for the Bates Group. She has also held past positions as the Senior Vice President and Associate General Counsel at MetLife. Excited to have her on the podcast today, Mrs. Sheila Murphy. Welcome to the podcast. How are we doing today?
I'm so grateful to be here, Nate. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm very happy to have you here, Sheila. Now, before we get started, can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Well, you gave sort of the biography of me, but what I think is interesting to a lot of people is I sort of, we were talking earlier, you and I, and there's this path you get on, and I was on that path to go to law school. But the one thing is, I don't like speaking in public. I don't like talking to people. And so I went to law school with this dream of being what I call an ostrich attorney, which is someone who keeps their head sort of in the sand or their head in the desk. And I thought this was a great strategy. And I got a job doing corporate law at a law firm. And I thought, oh, fabulous. I can go, I could be in a basement, I can draft documents, don't have to talk to anyone. And on my first day, as I'm waiting to go to my office, the managing partner comes out and introduces himself and says, by the way, we were short one litigator and we need someone to take that spot and we selected you. And like my heart just dropped. It's like my mother helped with law school. She'll kill me if I run out of here now. So I ended up being at law school. And my first job, like feeling like a fraud for like 5 to 6 years. And then finally, a friend introduced me to an opportunity in-house. It's like, oh, thank God, I never have to pretend. I don't have to act like I want to go to court or do any of this. And then I got there and I'm in a meeting one day and one of my peers got promoted. And the thing was, it wouldn't bother me, but he really was a lousy lawyer. But he did all the things like talk about himself, tell people what he was doing. And I realized in that moment, I needed to change if I wanted to have a career that I wanted, and also just help my company out so I didn't have the lousy lawyering going up the ranks. And so what I tell people all the time is you can change. You can do things that seem uncomfortable and get to another level. And, the ironic part is that lousy lawyer, by the time he left for the company, was reporting to me. So that's sort of the moral of the story.
Well, I think at first it's a wonderful story, and there's a big point to be made there. Something that I've talked about on this podcast with many guests is the malleability of skills, the fact that you can change the way that you do things and improve the way that you do skills very efficiently. And you got to get, oh, I did it again, but got to get the reps in. Something very important that I've learned, and something that on the previous episode with Jonah Perlin we talked about extensively. But let's go back to the wonderful year of 1984. I usually say what age I was, and I've noticed that I keep offending people. So I gotta stop doing that. But I think I was
You were young.
negative 19, perhaps. I might be getting my math wrong there. But you were at Binghamton, you got a Bachelor of Science in Management, and then the next year, once you graduated, you went to UPenn Law School in 1985. Simply put, Sheila, why'd you go to law school? Why'd you make the decision?
Well, first, when I went to Binghamton and I ended up with a management degree, I broke my father's heart. He wanted an accountant. It was a great, safe position. And so when I decided I didn't want that, it seemed like a lot of people were going to law school. So I sort of got on the train, if that makes sense. And we were all studying for the LSTAT together. We talked about that. Actually, Billy Baldwin was in my LSTAT class. I don't know if you know, he was a Binghamton graduate. And he smartly did not smartly. He decided not to go to law school to pursue that acting thing. But it was sort of like I always loved, like I love this old movie that's called Adam's Rib with Katharine Hepburn and Spencer Tracy. And I just loved how she was able to be her full self and smart and whatever in the courtroom, even though I didn't want to go to court. And that sort of inspired me to go to law school. I did graduate a few months early, so I actually did work for a year at a support company for lawyers, which everyone thought, oh, this will be a great experience. It didn't matter to anything I ever did later on. It's one of those things people are like, oh, it'll be helpful. I don't know. But when I got there, I have to say, like, there's so many, and I think what makes this podcast so valuable is I was, I was first generation college graduate, first person to graduate on my mother's side from her family, in her immediate family. And my father was in education. So no one really understood the law or what it was. It was just a path that they thought was a good profession. I would do well. And I got to law school, and like there were people who really understood what this thing was about beyond maybe watching this TV show back then called The Paper Chase. And I was just so out of my league as to what it was going to be like that I think having people come on and talk about the experience and that, there are setbacks and failures and missteps and people still do well and it's okay is important because I was just out of my element.
Well, I appreciate you saying that this podcast has such value. I thank you for that. That's a very nice comment. It's very nice that I could put things out that are valuable to people out there and who can learn from these experiences and be able to apply them to their own life. But you talk about how you were out of your element. So let's go to the first year of law school. How was that for you? A lot of people say it's very traumatic. A lot of people say, well, people love it actually. Some people come on this podcast and
Okay,
I can see, but yeah, go ahead.
here's the truth, because I'm not, I think you're getting the fact that I am a truth seeker. Like I said, I had always done well without really, I have a good memory. So I could read things several times and take a test and be okay. And I went to law school and I was not in the top 10% or 20%, but I also just kept doing what I used to do, which is go out. So I would find those few people at law school who went out. And so I did have a good social interaction there. Probably was not the best, I'm now my company now is a career company for lawyers. And probably not what I would recommend to someone in the job market today to take my path, but it worked for me. But I was lost a lot when people were talking about things like clerkships and law, and some people had worked in law firms as paralegals, and some people had very concrete ideas of what they wanted to do and how it was in the career path. And that's what I meant, that there was this whole other world of people who were a lot more mature than I was at that point, probably am too. And I just didn't understand what it was to go to law school and the whole process. And I think my lack of confidence in public speaking and presenting myself was also a hurdle in terms of interviewing for summer associate things and things like that. But I just didn't, I was like, yeah, I had no clue what was going on. It eventually worked out, but it took a little time.
Well, it all comes to the trials and tribulations of life, but it sounds like you had a very learning experience. Reality sometimes hits you in the face very fast, and you're like, "Oh my God, what am I going to do from here?" But from that, you continued to speak about how you had trouble with public speaking, and that you wanted. I know you were saying before you wanted to be the ostrich lawyer, keep your head in the sand. And in terms of that, how did you sort of figure out what you wanted to do with the law, what sort of specialized field you wanted to go into prior to becoming an associate at Thatcher Profit?
Well, it was really just like where I wouldn't have to speak. That was my game plan. That was really it. Someplace where I would just do documents and not have to go to court. That was, it wasn't really a lot of research. It wasn't based out of passion for anything. And so the irony is, after being put into litigation, is during my whole legal career, I was a litigator. I never went to the other side, even though I had options at certain points to explore different things. I did find that I liked the strategy of it and that whole pace, but I also found that I loved the in-house aspect, which was more advisory, big picture, meeting with the business, helping the business mitigate future risks. So I think once I left the law firm, which was great training, and I recommend law firms highly for that. It was only when I got in-house I realized that the strengths that I had were better suited for that environment.
So that's a really important point as well, playing to your strengths. I've sort of done that myself. I'm not not the biggest lover of school, but I like talking to people. So I made a podcast. And
See?
some
And now you're doing networking. You're schmoozing all over. You got it down.
don't reveal all my secrets,
Yeah.
Sheila, please. But I think it's an important point to make to play to your strengths, to be able to identify your strengths as well. Sometimes it's not exactly clear what you're good at or what you're not good at. But I think in the sense that you pursued the sort of position that you knew you were going to be most successful in is a really important point to make for people out there listening. You eventually became the counsel at MetLife, and you were there for 18 years.
23.
23. Oh, wow. Yeah, 23
Years.
years. It started in 95. I read the end of the zeros there. 23 years at MetLife. I'm a Giants fan. I love MetLife Stadium, even if it's not the best, but that's okay. It doesn't have to be the best. I'm there for the game.
See,
Anyway.
if you're as old as I have, I've actually seen Super Bowl wins now.
But can you talk about your experience at MetLife, sort of
I-
going up the ladder and such like that?
and I started to, that's where I met the gentleman. I loved my time in in-house. I really, found where I thought I could add value. I did have to, like I said, improve certain things to be able to have the impact I wanted on the organization. But what I loved about it was the idea that when I started there, I, came in and I was sometimes acting like a partner at a law firm and sometimes acting like a first-year associate, depending on what I was doing. And I just learned so much because it was such high-level work. You had so many matters that it was constantly learning. And even though I was mostly in the same group, certain things came in and out of it over time. So I was never bored until maybe the end a little bit after 23 years. But I had an old-fashioned pension, which is another reason to stay at a company. If you ever find a company that still has an old-fashioned pension, it might be worth it. And so, but it was just constantly learning new people, good issues, and a place that, I could network and get to know people. And still, I'm out now 5 years and I still talk to probably people from that company all the time and go out with them. I was out with one of them this week. And so when you find a place that fits you culturally, enjoy it and take advantage of it. I've had, that was for me. There were other people who work there and I have counseled people to maybe look for different cultures or opportunities because it was clear that there was a disconnect between what they valued or what the culture was like and where they would thrive. And so, I think that's also something very important for people to realize, sometimes it's not about you or the company, it's just not a good fit. And this goes for law firms too. And there is a place, and it may take some meandering around where you will be a good fit, but, take some risks, build some skills and things so that you can get different opportunities to figure out what are your strengths and how do you leverage them.
This is interesting because I don't think I've ever talked about office culture before on the podcast, but this is our opportunity now. Can you sort of describe what an office culture is just as a sort of meaning, and then as well how to identify if a culture is right for you or not?
Well, and sometimes you don't know whether one's right for you until unfortunately you're there. And I often tell people, if you're in one that doesn't work, write down what doesn't work so you can ask questions the next time when you go on an interview to see if that's a similar culture. Other clients of mine have reached out to people who used to work in the culture to see what it's like because they've had bad experiences in different ones. A lot of it has to do with things such like, what's the autonomy? How much autonomy do you have? Do you also have support? Are there ways for you to develop? Do you feel like you belong and it's an inclusive relationship? Met was a very meritocracy. It changed to a meritocracy while I was there, which meant we had like forced distributions of curves. You have curves in college. We had curves for our ratings, which impacted opportunities for bonuses and this. And we started out with like 20 on the high, 20 on the low. So there was 20% of the people at the low end every year. And some people did not thrive in that type of meritocracy. Some would say it wasn't, maybe, some people had some questions as to how meritocracy, whether they were looking at the right criteria, whatever. But for some people, that wasn't a good fit. For me, how they were approaching it was a good fit for me. And I liked that it was inclusive. And I liked that I had a lot of autonomy when I first got there. And I was given a lot of opportunities to do different things and hard things and things I hadn't done before. And I had the support of my management and the higher management in doing that. So it's understanding, how much micromanagement, though no one tells you they're a micromanager, but it's trying to ask questions like, how would you describe the culture here? What do you like? What would you change about the culture? So if you're interviewing, you can ask those types of questions, and sometimes you'll get answers that will be helpful. What happened to the person in the last position? Why did they leave? So that starts to give you clues. If you look at it and it's everyone is a white guy, is this the right place for me? I don't, maybe yes, maybe no, maybe there's more opportunities because, you're exposing new ideas to them. But it's just understanding all of that as part of the culture.
Yeah, I've came across company culture before. My brother and his business partner had a startup, which I won't get into the weeds of all that, but it would basically describe allow companies to show I guess the people who are looking to get a position to sort of ask questions to an AI chatbot, get some
Okay.
responses. And one of the big questions that were always asked when they went through sort of the surveys and the tests is, what is the company culture? What's the sort of day to day? And I think those are really important things that kind of get swept under the rug when you're thinking about getting positions. Oh, go ahead if you have something to say.
We spend so much time at work that you want to be a place you feel comfortable at. I mean, if you're, there's very few lawyers, there's some lawyers who work part-time stuff, but most lawyers work fairly lengthy hours. And so if you're going to be doing that, you want to be in a place you feel like you belong. It's a good fit. That the people you're in the trenches with are people you want to be in the trenches with. I'm not saying homogeneous, but like people who are nice and supportive and interesting. So, it really is critical to understand. And then, there are places that, some people refer to as Midwest nice. I hope no one gets offended by that, which is, people who are nice to your face and then the behind, they're doing other things. New York, they tend to stab you right in the front, it's sort of, where you stand. But that type of thing. And so it's important to know. And if it isn't working, there's no shame, in looking for another alternative. Now, if someone gives you feedback, you may still need to work on certain things, but there's no shame in changing positions.
So something you talked about before in terms of your time at MetLife, you were able to network with a ton of people, meet a ton of people, still talk to those people to this day. Can you talk about how important networking is and how it's been in your career? And I guess as well, to tag on to that, mentorship as well in your career as well, how integral and important they've been in your career.
Other than probably my first law firm job, I don't know if I've had an opportunity that did not come out of networking. So really there's this saying, networking, your network is your net worth.
Oh, I see that.
And there are studies that show that no matter what industry you're in, so whether you become a lawyer or not, it really is one of the indicators of success. And so, I mean, if you're not in law school yet, or even when you are in law school, it's just meeting your classmates, keeping in touch. It's very little things, but it's making those connections and making time for people and getting to know them and what they know and what they think and having them know you. And so whether it's being at the office, like when I was at the company, and I think some law firms, they have committees and, resource groups you can join. And that's one way of meeting people who are doing different things, having lunch with a colleague rather than eating at your desk. If your company offers you the opportunity to go to events or conferences, and sometimes if they don't, paying out of pocket, all these things sort of add to your value because you know more people who can help you if you ever need it. It also exposes you to different thought leaderships and maybe even different cultures. A lot of times when I'm talking to people who are thinking about changing jobs, I'm like, well, talk to some other people in different firms, different companies, different whatever, so you can get a sense of what other things are possible. And that only happens if you have people you can talk to.
So something you mentioned as well, just in that sort of short sentence there, is that having a strong network can add value to what you do and add value to the company that you work at, or maybe you work for yourself. And in terms of adding value to yourself, adding values to your customers, your consumers, whatever it may be, can you talk about value and how important that is throughout anyone's career?
I mean, when you want, first of all, to feel like a human being meaningful, you want to add value. You want to feel like you're giving something, that what you're doing is good. But beyond that, you know, to have a successful career, you want people to, you know, perceive you as having value and adding it. And, you know, unfortunately, part of life now and then is there a cut. So you want to make sure you're like the one giving value. It's sort of like, and one way of doing this, when you're networking or going to events and hearing people talk, it allows you to hear about how different companies, different people are addressing problems, issues. And you could bring that thought leadership back to your organization in a way. And also when you have that network, if your organization is facing an issue, and I've done this a lot, I would reach out to people who I knew at different companies and say, how did you guys handle this? What did you do? What do you think about this? Do you know this law firm on the other side? How do I approach it? And so all of a sudden you are valuable because you're not siloed or isolated. You know, you have exposure to things. And then if unfortunately you need to look at some point for a new position, they're there for that too. But again, if they know you add value, because people don't like to recommend people unless they know they can add value.
That's absolutely right. Something I've learned through the all 28 episodes, how important value is, how important delivering value is in literally anything that you do in your life. Because if you're a valuable person, people will probably like you. I would assume so. I mean, obviously you have to be a nice person and all that. But I think at the end of the day, if you can provide value to any sort of position that you're doing, even in the sort of podcast realm, as you said before, you think I add value, and I appreciate that. But in a sense, it's important in anyone's life and anyone's career to be able to go forward and jumpstart their career. The first thing you should do is build up your skills and add some value to yourself, so then employers will look at you and be like, "This is the guy we want."
And make sure people know what you're doing and how you're adding value. A lot of times some of us are hesitant. And, you know, clearly that was also on my list of issues when I started. But if people don't know what you do and how you do it, then they're not going to take that into account. So it can feel awkward. There are ways to, you know, you can get a brag buddy who will talk about you if you're shy. But you do want to start to get a little bit more comfortable about talking about how you do add value, because it is important. And you deserve to get the credit if you do it.
That's absolutely right. Now, let's talk about what you do now. Well, first, you're an expert and consultant at the Bates Group. I wonder to myself, what exactly does that mean? What do you do there?
So Bates is an expert and consulting company that when companies are looking for additional sourcing, like people to help them with huge compliance or risk mitigation projects, they're hired. They're also hired when you need experts for trial. And so I'm one of their experts. I've helped them with some other things, but I'm one of their experts, mostly in the insurance and financial services area, so that if an issue comes up, I have, you know, and that it's a good fit, I have the opportunity to be considered.
Well, I was just interested because I keep a lot of people, and I'm not singling you out, but a lot of people are consultants, and consultants is a huge industry that I honestly had no idea about. I just learned today because I know a couple people who work at KPMG, and I thought it was all accounting. That's all they
Yeah.
did. But they have a whole other side dedicated to consulting. My mind was blown into millions of people.
And the consulting side for a lot of these organizations is actually more fruitful and profitable than the accounting side. It's very different. Yeah. And so, yeah, that was, and that was sort of the big project part. Like, so if they had a compliance or risk mitigation project with an organization, someone like me might be brought in to look at it, see if they had an issue and they were trying to put policies and procedures in, whether all the feedback loops were in, whether I thought it was good. So it's that type of thing also, that, you know, it's
it's a broader thing, but a lot of people do like the consultancy world.
So you are the president, CEO, and general counsel
And
at
founder,
and
it's a one
founder.
man show. I'm chief
The
cook and bottle washer too.
the whole thing. The
Okay.
founder, president, CEO, and general counsel at Focus Forward Consulting. So tell me, what do you do there? How
Okay,
has it been?
I love it. So one of the two things happened that precipitated this. 2008 was a bad year for the law, and a lot of people lost their jobs, and even though I was in-house, I had a lot of friends who were at law firms who were adversely impacted by what was going on. And a lot of them were people who were in their law firms, did not own their own business. And so before, they used to get fed from partners. And when there was less work, guess who didn't get fed? And so I started doing some volunteer work with mostly women who were at law firms who were sort of trying to figure out how to develop their own business. And then at the same time at Met, I had climbed the ladder to an extent where I had a team. And one of the things I became known for was my talent development. And like most of my teams, a lot of members of my team went on to have really great careers, either inside or outside the company. And so I was put on all the talent initiatives, and I really loved it. That was the part of my job that I loved as a leader and manager, was helping people find what they were good at, whether it was there or someplace else, and help them pave that path to getting there. So the two things sort of had to do with, how do you change your career? So while I was thinking about what I wanted to do when I hit my pension number, I realized that I really had this passion for talent. So I spent like a year or two talking to different people about what that could look like. What type of jobs? Do I go to a law firm and do something? Do I do it? And I eventually decided to form my own company and work with individuals, law firms, and companies on sort of talent development issues, including a lot of focus on career leadership and business development. And so I've been doing that now for about 5 years, on top of the Bates part of my portfolio.
It's crazy because I see 2019 and I don't think it's that long ago. And you just said it was 5 years ago. I'm a little blown away right now. But I just have to say, first of all, I think it was very cool that you had your own team. I want my own team one day because I just think it's awesome. Even if it has nothing to do with anything, just to have a team would be
I
awesome.
have had some great people on my team. I actually just went with one of my teams to, a lot of them were turning, I hate to say, 50. So they rented a place in Lake Como and invited me. So I went there, and it was great. And having a team and first of all, you leave an organization in better shape if you're good at it. And that's the first thing. But the second thing, you're really, I think of as a great responsibility to help people find what is right for them. And, like I said, it wasn't always that place. And I just think of it as your responsibility as a leader and a manager to do that. And so, I love it.
Yeah, I think the part about responsibility is what I'm most interested in because I feel like when I'm responsible for more things, I kind of put it up a couple gears and it sort of motivates me further to be like, all right, like I actually have people that are dependent on me. I got to really work my ass off, make sure I'm doing everything right. But we usually talk about on this podcast starting a law firm, but today we have a company. So can you talk about the process of starting a company? Because I feel like when I ask these questions, the Pandora's box opens. Yeah.
There's a lot to it. I thought, it's like, I thought I had prepped. Like I said, I was talking to people for a year or two. I thought about what a business plan could look like. I had it sketched out. I was known as a great networker beforehand. I thought I had, connections that would, light my business on fire. And, and I had some of that in the beginning, but then as you're doing it, you're like, okay, I need more leads. I need more of this. And so I started to think about educate myself more than I probably should have before I launched the business. And, I speak frankly about this, and, I was doing better than I thought I was going to do, but I also realized that I didn't, there was a ton I didn't know. Like I started going to free things by experts who are, on LinkedIn or webinars that they were running. And so I eventually, I think it was probably during the pandemic or right before it, joined, I got my own business coach, and she was running some masterminds, and I joined, and it really has changed the trajectory of my business because one, she was very pragmatic and practical as to how to set certain things up and automate them and what you needed to do to increase your funnel and how to be much more strategic and intentional with your business development than I was. And I think during my first year with her, I doubled my business. And so, and it was during the pandemic when and actually one of the things I learned is you need to say yes to every event. I was actually spending a lot of time on the subway, going to see people. But there's a lot of, and I continue to learn and make mistakes. And that's the whole thing when you're starting your own business. You're going to think, oh, this is a great idea. Falls flat. Why did it fall flat? Is it that I didn't do something right? Did it not speak to the audience? Did I not give enough time? Or is it just not something that they want? And so it's getting sort of, comfortable with a little bit of failure or not being successful on certain things and taking it as a learning opportunity. But I'll be honest, the nice part about it is my husband would say, well, you're still working pretty hard, but it's a different type of work and I have a lot more control over my schedule. So if one day I have 2 hours and I want to go for a run, I can do that like at 12 o'clock and no one's going to look at me like, where have you been when you come in sweaty into the office? There's a lot of flexibility, but you're also on, you're feeding yourself. So as we were talking about earlier, if I want this to work, I have to be doing, no one is feeding me work. There's not a steady paycheck. So you do want to think about if you are going to launch your own business, a lot of people do podcasts like you are, how you're going to market yourself, how you're going to network, what are your message points, what's your value statement, to get back to what we were talking to earlier. We talked, showing value, but also how do I demonstrate to people who might not know me except from social media, my value so that they want to hire me.
Yeah, those are fantastic points, I have to say. They're questions that I ask myself every day, and I'm still trying to figure it out still, trials and tribulations of the whole thing. I have my podcast, but
the beauty is you have, people, I think, and especially I was probably that way too in college. Like, I said, the natural path was I was going to go to law school. I didn't do the accountant thing. So next thing, law school. But so many people change their careers so many times to do different things that we get, nothing is final. Nothing is it. And there's always opportunities to do or try something different. I have clients who've gone into PR. I have one in crisis management, one in diversity, one who's done a startup in Paris. So, well, I have traditionally mostly your traditional lawyers, but there are just so many opportunities out there that, if it's not right for you, that's okay. You've learned some stuff that's going to be transferable. What do you do next?
once again, fantastic point. Being able to pivot, being able to take those risks, assess your career, really thinking about, and this is something I've been reading in a book that I recently got, The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss, and he talks about extensively. And I would have to say, I'm guessing you've probably read that book before.
Yes.
Because you got the lifestyle down. I have to say, you got the 4-hour work week down. But something he talks about is being able to reflect and being able to see what's the worst that could possibly happen. How bad could it be? And I think that's such an important point because people feel cornered. People feel, I'm going to be in this career for the rest of my life.
And I've had a lot of people who've been fired in this. And guess what? it works out at the end in some way. And that's also when we were talking earlier about your network. And, you know, that's another place your network can be so valuable. If you're not in the right place for you, they're there to help you explore, and like I did, what was going to be next. And actually, my place was the right place for me for like 20 something years, but I wanted something different. You know, some people it's 7 months and then they want something different, but you know, people can help you explore that. You don't have to do it by yourself.
It's absolutely right. And I just want to go back to something you said before, which was the ability to say no is so, so important. And it's something that I've learned throughout my, through the short journey that I've had here. It's been absolutely integral, the ability to say no. Can you sort of talk more on that and describe it more?
So many of us just feel like we have to say yes to everything. We're either people pleasers or we're worried what will happen. And, you know, at some point, if you're saying it too much, it may be a problem. But, you know, if you don't say no, what happens is you become overworked, overdone, burnt out. And then the quality of the work that you're giving isn't what people want. And then you're in a worse position than if you had said no in the first place. And so it's also about being able to set boundaries, learning about how to say no in a way that, especially in the workplace, you know, I would love to work with you on that project, but I have 5 things for 5 other partners. How do I, what do you think? Like, should I prioritize or can I work on the next deal? You know, so it's trying to say it in a way that's not like, no, I don't want to work, but really explaining why and still being eager and interested. And it's also important to be able to say no to yourself, because sometimes we hold on to work rather than give it to somebody else. And so you don't learn to delegate or say, oh, is there a more junior person? And then you're not doing the work that's going to help you grow and do strategies. And then you're stuck and you feel miserable because you're bored because you're doing the same thing. But one, you feel no one can do it as well as you. There are also some managers who believe if they delegate certain things, what would happen to them? Do they look like they could be redundant and be thrown, like out? But to me, it's being able to say no to everybody, including yourself, because now and then we're our own worst enemy in terms of not setting appropriate boundaries.
I certainly know that very well. I've been on Instagram before, those reels that get after me, they certainly do. And I always talk about they are built to make you keep swiping. And there's so many times where I'll just be doing it and I literally have to tell myself in my head, like, hey Nate, take your hand off the phone, stop scrolling. So it's just something like that. And I just had to,
This is a little bit off kilter, but I was just listening to Cillian Murphy, who's in Oppenheimer. And I guess Chris Nolan does not allow phones on the set because he wants everyone focused.
he doesn't have a phone either.
Yeah, and Cillian is the same way. Like he has a rotary phone at home, so he was like the only one who fit into this mode. Like Robert Downey Jr. was evidently losing his mind because he couldn't get on his phone or hiding it or throwing it if anyone came by. So, but there is something to be said is like, I actually think in some ways it's good for a little distraction, clear my head. I can come back fresh and do something, but you have to, again, set those internal boundaries.
So speaking of the 4-hour work week, as it's becoming one of my favorite books I've ever read. But this is, I guess, a new segment that I'm putting on. I'm testing it out here. This is the first episode. I have asked people for their book recommendations, but I want to establish it now that this is going to be a question for every single episode going forward.
Okay, I can get The Edge by Alison Levine is one of my favorite books. It's she was part of the first U.S. American women team to try to climb Mount Everest, and it's a book about leadership through the lessons that she learned. So it's one of my favorites. I also like Habits, I think by Adam Grant. It tells you how to create good habits and not. Mindset, The Psychology of Success is another fabulous book. And if your audience is probably too young to hopefully to have children, but if you do, it's really good, I think, in parenting skills. What other books do I like? How to Build Your Dream Network by my friend Kelly Huey is a good book. I'm sure I will think, I have a whole list at some place that I always recommend to people. Oh, if you were going to become a manager. So this is a little bit down the road. It's called Radical Candor by Kim Scott, Radical Candor, How to Be a Kick-Ass Manager Without Losing Your Humanity, which is a great title.
It is a good title. I like that one. Oh my goodness.
And it's all about, being honest with people when you're managing them, whether about strengths, fit, whatever, so that they can make and that sort of was my philosophy as a manager. I'm not going to make decisions for you, but I'm going to make sure you have the information, all the information that I can give you, so you can make informed decisions about how you want to handle your career. You may not always like what I have to say, but I'm going to tell you, what's working, what's not. And then you can either decide you'd like to fix it and we can work together and collaborate, or not, but giving people the information so that they can, figure out what they should be doing.
I just wanted to establish that this is becoming a new segment, an established segment, because first I think book recommendations are really good. I love reading books, so I always write them down. I always keep them. But to give a little sneak peek, I've been working on something in the background a little bit. I've been seeing what Substack has to offer. So I might start releasing some articles with all the book recommendations that have ever been said on the Lawyers in the Making podcast.
Oh, another great one is by my friend, three other women and my friend Rhonda McLean, and it's called, I don't know the full title, and she would tell me, The Little Black Book of Success, and it's for a guide for Black women, and that's the part I'm missing. But it is, in my mind, one of the best books for someone starting out, whether you're a woman or man, no matter what race. There are so many gems of wisdom in that book about how to think about your career and move forward. It's a fabulous book, especially, either as a graduating college or thinking about embarking on a law school career.
Well, I always love the recommendations, but we're down to our last three questions. The first question is, what are the sorts of things that you consume, not food, consume on a daily basis, either that be through social media, so, Instagram, the X platform, Facebook, YouTube, Reddit, any favorite people that you like to read on a daily basis? What is crossing the transom of Sheila's mind on a daily basis?
Okay, this is sort of like when I sort of be very transparent. I don't know, I know you looked at some of my stuff on LinkedIn, but I'm a big pop culture person.
Okay.
So I watch a lot of TV, a lot of movies, whether it was from 1920 through the present. And, I read a ton of, like I said, I can read some highfalutin books, but I also read a lot of junk. But I am a reality TV maven. Like, I watch a lot of reality TV, and it's sort of my escape. And I do on X follow that a lot. I rarely comment on it, but I love following the strings. And I follow a lot of people on LinkedIn just who are thought leaders, like Adam Grant, I think I mentioned, Brene Brown, some other people, just to see how they're approaching management and other things. So there is that high part. And then I try to read a good mix of, like we were talking about, the nonfiction, and then I read a lot of fiction, whether it's, and probably one of my favorite genres is Scandinavian murder mysteries, which I started reading them. I liked them. And then the New York Times came up with like 300 novels. And so I worked my way through it. And now there's sequels to most, so I'm still going. But yeah, so I like to consume. I like getting a lot of information from a lot of different sources, like some that I agree with, some that I don't agree with, so that I am not siloed in my thinking.
Yeah, I think
I try not to be siloed in my thinking.
I think that's an excellent point, not being so siloed in your thinking, having an open mind, being able to see all the different viewpoints that are possible, and then boiling it down, seeing how practical it can be in your life. But I have to ask, you love reality TV. Are you a fan of The Real Housewives?
I've watched every episode since they've come on in every franchise. How's that?
No, that's excellent. My mother,
yeah.
my mother is a very big fan. I'd have to say my favorite is New Jersey. How could it not be? I think they're the most iconic. Do you disagree?
I like New York better. Miami's good. Salt Lake City right now. I've actually gone to watch What Happens Live once. My daughter is in media, so she's met some of the people. Mostly the Vanderpump Rules people.
Oh, okay, okay.
But yes, yeah, I am like from day one, like and it was funny, again, the New York Times had an article on the Orange County Housewives. Says, oh, this looks interesting, because that was the first one. And it says, oh, let me watch this. Started with them, and then everyone that's come on since I have watched.
I've seen Orange County. I like Atlanta.
I actually went to a New York event. I was actually and well, I won't say this in public, like we can talk about it offside. But anyway, so I went to one of the charity events that one of the New York Housewives was running.
Wow.
And so that was sort of interesting.
Oh, that's crazy.
So like a second, like a millisecond, I'm in the background of one of the shots.
Yeah, I just had to ask because you talk about reality TV. I've been watching that since I was like 5 years old because my mom, she put it on, she'd be watching on the couch. I'd just be sitting there watching with her. So I've been through a lot of the seasons. I know a lot of
Have you watched Traders on Peacock?
I have not.
It's got a lot of the housewives on it. The old very good. Season 2 is much better than season 1. I'll leave it at that.
Another reality TV show that I don't know if you like it or not, but one of my favorites. I love the Jersey Shore. Do you love the Jersey Shore?
I used to watch it. I know that I haven't watched it since they're sort of like grown up and back, but
I don't watch any of that.
I watched it when they were younger.
One of my favorite shows. It was literally a family event for us. We'd watch like the new episodes.
Are you from Jersey? No,
I'm from New York, but I'm from Long Island, Suffolk County.
Okay, we have a place in Fire Island, so I split my time between the city and Fire Island.
That is a wonderful thing. I love Fire Island. That's one of my favorite places. I'm usually out there every summer with my friends doing, whatever the hell we're doing.
Yeah, nothing we need to go on to.
Exactly. I don't need to be detained live on the Lawyers in the Making podcast. But my second to last question here. You're always working, you got your consulting company, you're doing stuff for WOMN, the Bates Group, but what does an ideal Friday night and Sunday morning look for Sheila?
Oh, Friday night, drinks and dinner probably, and that's Friday night. And Sunday morning, if it's during the summer, I run I get up, I run, and then I come back, and then I walk to the beach, go to my own little corner at the beach and Fire Island, and with my book, and that's a very happy day with maybe the crossword puzzle. But I do a lot of networking and going out, for my work. So a lot of times when it's on my off time, I like to make it smaller, either people who I'm very close to or family and stuff. So it's sort of that regroup. While I have become less of an ostrich, it's still probably a little bit of my tendency to have some of that time to refuel.
Absolutely.
And usually, a glass of wine or two,
Listen, absolutely. Wind down. It's how it's supposed to be in the off time. Now, the last question here, Sheila, I do this at the end of every episode. What are your words of wisdom for the aspiring law students, the current law students, and the current legal professionals out there in the world?
It's a long career. You're not wed to anything. There are a lot of options. Be open to them. Learn what you can and take advantage of it. I think too many times lawyers get wed to a path that they think is the right path, and it may not be right for them. And so think about what's right for you and make your decisions from there.
Beautifully poetic, Sheila. But that's the podcast, Sheila. Thank you so much for coming on, sharing these experiences, sharing this wisdom. And for everyone out there listening, thank you for tuning in, and I will see you in the next one.